Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cisco Optics Podcast, where we talk about pluggable optics for networks. After you plug the optic into the switch, router, or server, you're not done. You still have to plug in a fiber optic cable. What does this fiber cable infrastructure look like? It's a lot more sophisticated than you might imagine. This is episode 13, and we continue a conversation with Brian Kelly of Panduit. I've worked with Brian for a number of years because Cisco and Panduit have basically the same customers, even though we don't make the same products. Cisco is a network gear provider and Panduit is a fiber cable infrastructure provider. You need both the hardware and the fiber cable to complete your network. In this fifth part of our six-part conversation, we learn about the impact of thermals and power in data centers. Brian L. Kelly joined Panduit in 2012. In 2014, he joined corporate R&D as a solution architect. Prior to joining Panduit, he worked for 14 years in the telecommunications and data center co-location industries. Currently, Brian manages Panduit's network architecture team, which develops reference architecture content for the data center and enterprise businesses. In addition, he manages the Panduit Labs network, which provides secure connectivity and resources to their labs in Tinley Park, Illinois. Brian has written well over 20 technical papers that have been published on the Panduit website as well as partner websites. Brian owns a bachelor's degree from Illinois State University and a master's degree in business administration from Keller Graduate School of Management. And I'm glad he did all that, so we don't have to. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. It may show up as a Cisco Podcast Network, which has other great podcast series as well. Check out our blog at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics Blog, all one word, no hyphen, and no spaces. You'll find podcast notes and links there too. For our YouTube playlist, go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. And for product information, go to cisco.com/go/optics. And now, join me as I talk with Brian Kelly. I don't remember if you specified directly, but I know that thermal considerations in racks is a big deal.
It is, yeah, definitely. We make a whole bunch of different thermal ducts for data center top of rack switches. So, in a data center, the top of rack switch is generally going to be mounted in the back of the cabinet, which is going to be the hot side. And what it does is it's trying to pull air from the front side of the cabinet, which is where the cold air is. And, a lot of the top of rack switches are shorter than the rail length. So, for instance, you may have like a 10, 12, 15, 20 inch space between where the hot aisle separates from the cold aisle, which is basically at the front RU of the cabinet. And so what we did is we started making these ducts that go from the 1RU switch. They're slightly adjustable, and they work great with especially the Cisco Nexus.
Brian. I'm just trying to visualize what you described. So you're saying the hot and the cold aisles. Were you saying that they can be very close to each other?
It's hard to explain without a visual, but basically in a data center, the front of the cabinet is cold.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The back of the cabinet.
And that's the intake usually, right?
So like the cold air in the data center is coming up, say, from the floor or above. It's blowing on the front side of the cabinet. So like a server takes cold air from the front side of the cabinet and then exhausts it through the back side of the cabinet.
All right.
And so the hot air is on the back side of the cabinet.
Okay.
In a server cabinet, your connectivity, so you're connecting from the switch to the server, is going to be done on the back side of the cabinet. So the switch is mounted in the back of the cabinet. Now, a lot of the older switches were actually really long, and they went all the way back to the front rail. So they were able to pull cold air through the switch to cool off the switch. But a lot of the newer designs have actually been much shorter. So they're not reaching the cold air that's on the front side of the cabinet. So we make these like extender ducts, and they
Oh,
extend
okay, I
out.
see now.
Yeah, from the
Okay.
back of the switch to the front of the cabinet, so that cold air is able to reach the backside of the switch without
Okay.
getting kind of muddled with hot air that may be coming in from the backside of the cabinet. It
I see.
actually makes a huge difference in the performance of the switches because depending on your switch location, which is usually at the top of the rack, right?
Mhm.
The heat rises, and it depending on how densely populated your server cabinet is, the heat could be pretty intense, and you're actually pulling in a lot of hot air. Whereas if you have this duct that goes to the front of the cabinet, it's going to pull in, the 70 or
Well, or
67 degree, air that's on that side.
that hasn't mixed with the other hotter air yet. Right.
Yeah, and it hasn't mixed at all, and it won't
Okay.
mix because the ducts are designed to make sure that enough air gets to the switch itself.
Cool.
We had to do this with a lot of the older catalyst switches and some of the older Nexus switches because they were side-to-side breathers actually. And when they were
Oh,
put into a data center, it's front to back. It's hot aisle, cold aisle. And so we made these special ducts that would pull from RU above the switch and RU below the switch, and then funnel it to the side,
oh
and
wow.
then it would go across the switch over to the other side and exhaust out the other side to the back side of the cabinet. But yeah, there was a lot of work that had to go into those because if you don't have enough RU above and below the cabinet, and some of them only need above, but if you don't have enough space, enough real estate there, you'll actually starve out the switch and actually kill it faster than you would with just hot air. So
Plus, you
we
need
had to do
space
a
on
lot
the
of testing.
sides, right? Would you need space on the sides to make room for this duct?
Yeah, you absolutely have to have. Most of these are designed for an 800 millimeter wide cabinet, so there's different sizes that you can have. Basically, 600 millimeter, which is 24 inches, 700 millimeter, which is 28 inches, and then 800 millimeter, which would be like 32 inches, roughly.
Okay.
A lot of data centers like to use 24-inch cabinets because the tiles in the data center are 2 feet wide or 24 inches. So it aligns really well with that size. Unfortunately, the 24-inch cabinets or 600 millimeter cabinets are extremely hard to cable manage in and just generally work in because they're so tight. The rails basically run right to the edge of the cabinet itself, so there's really no extra space to cable manage or anything. So for a switch cabinet, like if you're using a big chassis switch and you put it in a 600 millimeter cabinet, it's not going to play very well. So that's why. Sorry, go ahead.
What's the relation to the tile, though? I mean, I can see that it would look nicer, but is there any functional reason why they want to align with the tile spacing?
I think it's partly aligning with the tile, but also partly space utilization. So if you're using a tile and a quarter for each one, you can get less cabinets in your data center. And it does work out nicely because generally the floor is kind of set out to those tiles, and if you're using, say, you have 24 tiles across, you can do 24 cabinets across. And if you were using a 700 millimeter, you might only be able to get 20. And if you're using 800 millimeter cabinets, you might only be able to get 16. So it's kind of a numbers game, but also an alignment deal as well.
Okay. What about power? So, what are some of the challenges or innovations you see these days with respect to power?
Yeah, I mean, power is definitely monitoring of the PDUs is a huge deal now. People want to see the power usage that their cabinet is using. The servers, the switches, anything else that you may be powering within that cabinet. So we have a full line of PDUs. Our G5 PDUs have a full assortment of different types of monitoring and different power outlets. I mean, that's a huge. It's like the power consumption has gotten higher and higher, so the voltages and the amps have gotten much more. So we have a full array of different types of PDUs to basically be able to do any type of power connection that you might need within a data center.
So
Some
like
of it's
real-time?
it used to be like, I'm sorry, what's that?
Is this like real-time monitoring of the power?
Yeah, real time. Yeah, definitely.
Like what kind of refresh
You're
rate?
able to see the power draw.
Like, okay, so if it changes, minute to minute, you could see that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What do people do with
and
that
you could
data
do it.
then?
Some of it is just for monitoring, but I'm sure there's a lot of companies out there that, you can use that data to kind of understand like workloads, how much workloads, power consumption you're getting from certain workloads and whatnot at certain times of the day too. I know that was a big thing when I was in colocation. They wanted to kind of see how it graphed during the day, because it, say like if you're a financial firm at 3 p.m. Central Time when the New York Stock Exchange closed, or 2 p.m. I can't remember which one, but you would see a spike because you're downloading or passing all this information. That it kind of helps with analytics, I guess. To understand
okay.
your power consumption versus your workload. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with the data. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Anything related to like green initiatives?
Absolutely, yeah. PUE is a huge deal. I can't remember power utilization.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, I don't. I totally forgot what the E stands for, but basically it's how much overhead you have in your data center that you're, so like your cooling and the lights being on in the data center, that all affects your PUE. So you want to make sure that you have as little overhead as possible in your data center, and like 1 is, I think, perfect. And I don't know that that's completely achievable, but as low in the 1s as possible is actually the best. I have seen some people that were advertising 0.97 or something like that, but I think that was because they were selling back electricity or something somehow to the grid because they had solar panels or something. I don't know. That seems a little shady to me, because there seems like there would be a electrical cost somewhere in there, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the PDUs can really help kind of understand where your power consumption is coming from.
I see. That's interesting. So, you can actually, so you're talking about seeing like which time of day more stuff happens through the power profile, but also you can identify like maybe which racks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it may be like the workload in this rack is really taxing the power at a certain time of day, and you may change, you may move some stuff, VMware or whatever, virtual machine, you might move it to a different, server bank in a different cabinet at a certain time of day.
So you can basically optimize your resources.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the key, is to really, optimize as much as you can, and while the infrastructure may not be, moving the workload, it's providing you the visibility to be able to do that. It's enabling you to do that, cool. Basically. Yeah, it's pretty neat stuff.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about new stuff that you're doing at Panduit also.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what's been going on? What's the latest stuff that has you excited? that was the 5th part of my conversation with Brian Kelly. Next time, we'll get into Brian's latest work at Panduit. Subscribe to this podcast, and we'd really appreciate you helping get the word out. Share this with friends and colleagues that come to mind when you think of network technology and optics. And leave a review on Apple Podcast, formerly known as iTunes. We're also on all the other major podcast platforms. You may see the Cisco Podcast Network come up when you search for Cisco Optics Podcast. That's where we live, and you can find other great podcasts there too. Also, check out the Cisco Optics blogs at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics blog, no spaces and no hyphens. We also have educational videos on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. Thank you for listening. This is Pat Chow, Product Manager at Cisco Optics. The next episode is part 6, the final part of my conversation with Brian Kelly. Until next time.